I've always been the designated scare magnet in my friend group. You know, the one who screams at jump scares, flinches at loud noises, and generally makes everyone else feel brave by comparison. It's not exactly a role I auditioned for, but hey, someone's gotta do it, right? And by someone, I mean me. Always me. I'm not even sure how it started. Maybe it was that time in high school when Sarah convinced me to watch The Conjuring at her house, and I screamed so loud at the wardrobe scene that her dog started barking and her mom came running in thinking someone had died. Or maybe it was the haunted hayride last Halloween, where I spent the entire time clutching Jake's arm so hard I left bruises. He still brings that up, by the way. Remember when you almost broke my arm, you big baby? Yeah, Jake, I remember. Thanks for the reminder. Anyway, it's not like I enjoy being the scared one. I mean, who would? But over time, it just became my thing. The thing they could always count on to make them feel better about themselves. At least I'm not as jumpy as her, they'd say, laughing. And I'd laugh too, because what else was I supposed to do? Admit that it kind of hurt? Nah, easier to just play along. So let me introduce you to the gang. First, there's Sarah. She's the ringleader, the one who comes up with all the fun ideas. You know the type, always the first to suggest a prank, always the loudest laugh in the room. She's the kind of person who thrives on chaos, and honestly, I think she gets a kick out of seeing me squirm. Then there's Jake, the skeptic. He's the one who rolls his eyes at every ghost story and insists there's a logical explanation for everything. Spoiler alert, there isn't. And then finally, there's Emma, sweet, quiet Emma, who's usually just along for the ride. She's the kind of person who laughs nervously and says, "Are you sure this is a good idea?" but never actually stops anyone. Together, they're my best friends. My only friends, if I'm being honest. And yeah, maybe they tease me a little too much, but they're my people. Or at least they were, before everything went to hell. The thing is, I've always known I was the punchline, the butt of the joke, the one who makes everyone else feel brave. And for the most part, I've been okay with that. I mean, it's not like I had much of a choice. But last weekend, they took it too far. Way too far. They decided to summon a demon to scare me. Yeah, a demon. Because apparently haunted houses and prank YouTube channels just weren't cutting it anymore. I should have seen it coming, really. Sarah had been dropping hints all week. Wouldn't it be hilarious if we could, actually summon something? She'd say, grinning like a maniac. And I'd laugh it off. Because of course I would. Because that's what I do. I laugh, I brush it off, I pretend it doesn't bother me. But this time was different. This time, they weren't just talking about it. They actually did it. They found some sketchy ritual online, probably written by a 14-year-old with too much time and a love of creepy pasta, and decided to give it a whirl. Candles, chalk circles, the whole 9 yards. And me, I walked in on them mid-chant. And of course, they all burst out laughing. "Oh, look, we summoned a demon to haunt you," they said, like it was the funniest thing in the world. I rolled my eyes, made some sarcastic comment about how I hoped it at least had good Wi-Fi, and went to bed. Classic me, right? Always the punchline. Except it worked. The ritual, the demon, all of it. And here's the kicker. It didn't want me. It wanted them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start at the beginning. It was supposed to be a joke. A stupid, over-the-top, let's freak out the wimp kind of joke. That's what I kept telling myself anyway. As I stood there in the doorway of Sarah's living room, staring at the scene in front of me. Candles, chalk circles, and my 3 best friends sitting cross-legged on the floor, chanting something in a language that definitely wasn't English. I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing. "What's going on?" I asked. my voice sounding way calmer than I felt. Sarah looked up, her face breaking into that mischievous grin I knew all too well. "Oh, hey, perfect timing. We're summoning a demon to haunt you." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. There had to be a punchline, right? This was Sarah we were talking about. She loved pranks, sure, but this was next level insane. "You're what?" I finally managed to say. "Summoning a demon," Jake chimed in, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You know, because apparently we've run out of ways to scare you." Emma giggled nervously, her eyes darting between me and the flickering candles. "It's just for fun," she added, like that made it any better. I crossed my arms, trying to look annoyed instead of, mildly terrified. "Right, because summoning a demon is totally a normal Tuesday night activity." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. Don't be such a buzzkill. It's not like it's actually going to work." "Yeah," Jake said, leaning back on his hands. "It's just a bunch of nonsense we found online. Probably written by some kid with too much time on their hands." I glanced at the chalk circle on the floor, the weird symbols drawn around it, and the candles flickering ominously in the dim light. "Uh-huh. And the candles, the chanting, that's all just, what, for ambiance?" "Exactly," Sarah said, grinning. "Now get over here. We need you to stand in the circle." I took a step back, holding up my hands. "Oh no, no way. I'm not getting anywhere near that thing." "Come on," Sarah said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone she used when she was trying to get her way. "It'll be funny. Just stand there for like 2 seconds. We'll take a picture, post it online, and boom, instant meme material." I hesitated, glancing at Emma, who gave me an apologetic smile. "It's just a joke," she said softly. I sighed, knowing I wasn't going to win this one. "Fine, but if I get possessed, I'm haunting all of you." Sarah clapped her hands, looking way too excited about this. "Yes, okay, stand in the circle and try to look scared." I stepped into the chalk circle, feeling ridiculous. "Happy? Ecstatic," Sarah said, pulling out her phone. "Now everyone, look serious. We're summoning a demon, remember?" They started chanting again, their voices low and dramatic. I rolled my eyes, crossing my arms and trying to look as unimpressed as possible. "You know, if this demon has any taste, it's going to take one look at me and nope, right out of here." Sarah snorted, lowering her phone. "Okay, that's it. We're done. You're officially the worst summoning participant ever." "Glad I could help," I said, stepping out of the circle. "Now, can we order pizza or something? I'm starving." They all laughed, and just like that, the moment was over. We spent the rest of the night eating pizza, watching bad horror movies, and joking about the demon they'd supposedly summoned. It was a normal night, a fun night. Except it wasn't. Because here's the thing about jokes. Sometimes they're not really jokes. Sometimes they're warnings. And sometimes when you play with fire, you get burned. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that I went to bed that night thinking it was just another stupid prank. I couldn't have been more wrong. I went to bed that night thinking it was just another stupid prank. Sure, the whole summoning a demon thing was a little over the top, even for Sarah, but it wasn't like anything had actually happened. The candles had burned out, the chalk circle had been wiped away, and we'd all laughed it off over cold pizza and bad movies. Normal stuff. Except it wasn't normal. Not really. I didn't realize it at first. I mean, why would I? I was too busy trying to fall asleep, which, let me tell you, is no easy feat when your brain is wired like mine. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside, and I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I'd left the stove on. Spoiler, I hadn't. I don't even cook. But then I heard it. A sound, faint but unmistakable. A whisper. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding way too loud in the silence. No answer. I told myself it was nothing, just the wind or the house settling, or maybe even my imagination running wild again. But then I heard it again, closer this time. A low, guttural growl that sent a shiver down my spine. "Okay, not funny," I said, sitting up in bed. "If this is you guys, I swear, The growl cut me off, louder now, and I realized it wasn't coming from outside my door. It was coming from inside the room. I fumbled for the lamp on my nightstand, my hands shaking so badly I almost knocked it over. When the light finally clicked on, I half expected to see one of my friends crouched in the corner, laughing their ass off. But the room was empty, just me, my bed, and the faint smell of something burning. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the shadows on the walls and trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. The next morning, I dragged myself downstairs, feeling like I hadn't slept at all, which, let's be honest, I hadn't. Sarah, Jake, and Emma were already in the kitchen, sipping coffee and looking off. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. "You guys sleep okay?" Sarah glanced up, her eyes bloodshot and her face pale. "Not really," she muttered. "I had this nightmare." "Me too," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was awful. There were gaze in the dark and hands reaching out." Jake snorted, but it sounded forced. "Yeah, well, I didn't have any nightmares. Probably because I don't believe in that crap." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring at them and trying to ignore the knot of dread forming in my stomach. Because here's the thing. I hadn't told them about the whisper, or the growl, or the burning smell. And now, hearing about their nightmares, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a coincidence. But what could I say? "Hey guys, I think we might have actually summoned a demon last night." Yeah, no, they'd laugh me out of the room. So I kept my mouth shut and poured myself a cup of coffee, trying to act like everything was fine. It wasn't. Over the next few days, things got weird. Small things at first. Flickering lights, cold spots, objects moving on their own. The kind of stuff you could almost convince yourself was your imagination. Almost. But then the accident started. Sarah tripped down the stairs and broke her arm. Jake's car wouldn't start, and when it finally did, the brakes failed. Emma swore she saw something in the mirror, and now she won't look at her own reflection. And me, I'm just here, watching, waiting, trying to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do. Because here's the kicker. The demon doesn't bother me. It's like I'm invisible to it. I can feel its presence, this oppressive, suffocating weight in the air, but it doesn't touch me, doesn't even look at me. It started small. At least that's what I told myself. Little things, things I could almost explain away if I tried hard enough. Almost. The first time I noticed it, I was alone in the kitchen, washing dishes after one of our increasingly tense group dinners. Tense because Sarah kept jumping at every sound. Jake was snapping at everyone, and Emma hadn't said a word in hours. The faucet was running, the sound of the water almost drowning out the low hum of the refrigerator. And then, out of nowhere, the temperature dropped. I mean, it dropped. 1 second I was fine, and the next I could see my breath in front of me. My hands froze under the water, and I swear the stream turned icy cold. I yanked my hands back, staring at the sink like it had personally offended me. "What the hell?" I muttered, rubbing my arms to try and get some feeling back into them. And then I felt it, that weight, that presence. It was like the air itself had thickened, pressing down on me from all sides. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All I could do was stand there, staring at the sink as the water kept running and the cold seeped into my bones. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it was over. The temperature went back to normal. The weight lifted and I could breathe again. I turned off the faucet with shaking hands, telling myself it was just a draft, just the house settling, just my imagination. But deep down, I knew better. The next time I was in the living room, trying to distract myself with a book. Keyword, trying. I'd been staring at the same page for 20 minutes and hadn't absorbed a single word. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. Great, I said, setting the book aside. Just what I needed. I stood up, fumbling for my phone to use as a flashlight, when I heard it, a whisper, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't coming from any particular direction. It was just everywhere. And then, in the darkness, I saw it, a shadow, moving. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Hello, I called out, my voice trembling. No answer, just the whisper, growing louder, and the shadow, growing closer. I backed up until I hit the wall. My phone clutched tightly in my hand. The shadow stopped, just a few feet away, and for a moment, I thought it was going to, do something, anything. But then the lights came back on and the shadow was gone. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the spot where the shadow had been and trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. The worst part? The demon still wasn't bothering me. Not really. Sure, it was making its presence known. The cold spots, the whispers, the shadows. But it wasn't targeting me. Not like it was targeting them. Sarah was a mess. She'd started carrying a knife everywhere, convinced something was following her. Jake was barely sleeping, his eyes bloodshot, and his temper shorter than ever. And Emma hadn't left her house in days. She'd covered every mirror with sheets and refused to answer her phone. And me, I was just here, watching, waiting, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do. Because here's the thing, I could feel it, the demon. It was always there, lurking in the corners of my vision, pressing down on me like a physical weight. But it didn't touch me, didn't even look at me. And honestly, that was almost worse. It's funny, in a twisted sort of way, how quickly things can fall apart. 1 minute, you're a part of a group, laughing, joking, pretending everything's fine. And the next, you're on the outside looking in. That's where I found myself, standing in the shadows, watching as my friends unraveled, and feeling more alone than I ever had before. The demon wasn't just haunting them, it was tearing them apart. Sarah had become a paranoid mess, jumping at every sound and accusing everyone of being in on it. Jake was barely holding it together, his skepticism crumbling under the weight of everything he couldn't explain. And Emma, she'd shut down completely, locking herself away and refusing to talk to anyone. And then there was me, the one the demon ignored. At first, I thought it was a blessing. Who wouldn't want to be left out of a nightmare like this? But as the days went on, I started to feel different, separate, like I didn't belong anymore. My friends were drowning, and I was standing on the shore, unable or unwilling to throw them a lifeline. I tried to help. I really did. I offered to stay with Sarah when she was too scared to be alone. I tried to talk Jake down, when he started ranting about logical explanations. I even went to Emma's house, begging her to let me in, but it was no use. They were too far gone, and I was, what? The bystander? The witness? The truth is, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fight a demon, or if I even could. All I knew was that I was alone, and the weight of that loneliness was almost worse than the fear. It all came to a head one night when Sarah called an emergency meeting. Her voice was shaky on the phone, barely above a whisper, and she refused to say why she needed us all there. But I knew. We all knew. We gathered in her living room, the air thick with tension. Sarah was pacing, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Jake was sitting on the couch, his leg bouncing nervously, and Emma was just staring at the floor, her hands clenched into fists. "We need to do something," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "We can't just keep pretending this isn't happening." "Like what?" Jake snapped. "Perform another ritual? That worked out so well last time." "We have to try," Sarah insisted. "We can't just sit here and wait for it to... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I sat there, silent, watching as they argued. Part of me wanted to speak up, to tell them what I'd been feeling. The weight, the whispers, the shadows. But another part of me, a bigger part, was too scared. What if they didn't believe me? What if they thought I was crazy? And then, as if on cue, the lights flickered. The room went silent, the air so thick I could barely breathe. And then, from somewhere in the darkness, came a sound, a low, guttural growl that sent a shiver down my spine. Sarah screamed. Jake jumped to his feet, his eyes wide with fear. And Emma just sat there, staring into the darkness, her face pale and expressionless. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to stop, not unless we did something. But what? Sarah disappeared the night after the meeting. 1 minute she was there, pacing and ranting about how we had to do something, and the next, she was gone just like that. No note, no text, no trace, just an empty house and a lingering sense of dread. We searched for her, of course. Jake, Emma, and I combed through the neighborhood, calling her name and trying to ignore the sinking feeling in our guts. It was Emma who found her hours later in the woods behind Sarah's house. She was sitting against a tree, her knees pulled up to her chest and her eyes wide and unseeing. Her hair was a tangled mess, her clothes torn and dirty, and her lips were moving, whispering something I couldn't quite make out. "Sarah?" I said, crouching down in front of her. "Sarah, it's me. Are you okay?" She didn't answer, just kept whispering, her voice so low it was almost inaudible. I leaned closer, trying to hear what she was saying, and that's when I caught it. "The eyes," she muttered. "The eyes, the hands, they're coming." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Sarah, come on, let's get you out of here." I reached out to help her up, but she flinched away, her eyes finally focusing on me. "No," she screamed, scrambling back. "Don't touch me. Don't let them touch me." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Sarah, it's me. It's okay. We're going to get you help." But she wasn't listening. She just kept screaming, her voice raw and desperate, until Jake and Emma finally managed to calm her down. We took her to the hospital, but the doctors couldn't explain what was wrong with her. They ran tests, asked questions, and eventually just shrugged and said she was in shock. But I knew better. Sarah wasn't in shock. She was broken. Whatever the demon had done to her, it had left her a shell of the person she used to be. And as I sat there, watching her stare blankly at the wall, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. If Sarah's fate was a slow unraveling, Jake's was a free fall. The guy who once rolled his eyes at ghost stories and scoffed at the idea of anything supernatural was now a walking disaster. The demon had gotten to him, not in the same way it had gotten to Sarah, but it had gotten to him all the same. It started with the paranoia. Jake, who used to be the most level-headed of us all, started seeing things. Shadows moving where there shouldn't be shadows, faces in windows. He'd snap at us for no reason, accusing us of messing with him or being in on it. It was like he couldn't trust anyone anymore, not even himself. Then came the knife. I noticed it one day when we were sitting in his living room, trying to figure out what to do next. He had it clutched in his hand, his knuckles white from how tightly he was gripping it. "Jake," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "what's with the knife?" He didn't look at me, just kept staring at the door, like he was expecting something to come bursting through it at any second. "You never know," he muttered. "You never know when it's going to come for you." I didn't know what to say to that. I mean, what do you say to someone who's clearly losing it? So I just sat there watching him and trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. Things came to a head one night when I went over to check on him. He was pacing back and forth in his living room, muttering to himself and clutching the knife like it was the only thing keeping him alive. "Jake," I said, stepping closer, "you need to calm down. This isn't helping anyone." He spun around, his eyes wild. "You think I don't know that?" he shouted. "You think I don't know how crazy I sound? But it's real, okay? It's real, and it's coming for me." I took a step back, my heart pounding. "Jake, it's me. You're safe, just put the knife down, okay?" But he wasn't listening. He lunged at me, the knife flashing in the dim light, and I barely managed to dodge out of the way. I stumbled back, tripping over the coffee table and landing hard on the floor. "Jake!" I screamed, scrambling to my feet. "What the hell are you doing?" He didn't answer, just stood there, staring at me with this look in his eyes, like he didn't even recognize me. And then, before I could say anything else, he turned and ran out the door. I didn't see him again after that. Emma was always the quiet one, the one who went along with things, who laughed nervously but never really pushed back. But after Sarah's breakdown and Jake's disappearance, something in her snapped. She wasn't just scared anymore. She was desperate. It started with the mirrors. She covered every reflective surface in her house with sheets or towels, convinced that something was watching her through them. I tried to talk to her about it, but she wouldn't listen. She just kept muttering about the eyes and the hands, her voice trembling with fear. Then she stopped leaving the house altogether. She wouldn't answer her phone, wouldn't open the door, wouldn't even look out the windows. It was like she'd built a fortress around herself, and nothing could get in or out. I finally managed to get through to her one night, after hours of knocking on her door and begging her to let me in. She opened the door just a crack, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. "Emma," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You can't keep doing this. You can't just shut yourself away and hope it goes away." She shook her head, her hands trembling. "You don't understand. It's everywhere. It's in the mirrors, in the shadows, in the air. It's watching me. It's waiting." I reached out to her, but she flinched away. "Emma, please, let me help you." She didn't answer, just stared at me for a long moment, her eyes filled with a kind of hopelessness that made my chest ache. And then, without a word, she closed the door. I didn't see her again after that. By the time I was the only one left, I'd stopped trying to convince myself this was all in my head. Sarah was gone, broken beyond recognition. Jake had vanished, consumed by his own paranoia. And Emma, well, Emma had sealed herself away, a prisoner in her own home. The demon had taken them all, one by one, and I was left standing in the wreckage, trying to make sense of it all. But here's the thing, it hadn't touched me. Not really. Sure, I'd felt its presence, the cold spots, the whispers, the shadows, but it hadn't targeted me like it had the others. At first, I thought it was because I was too boring, too insignificant. But as I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the walls and listening to the silence, I started to wonder if there was more to it. And then it hit me. It wasn't ignoring me, it was protecting me. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. All those times I'd felt its presence, all those times I'd been sure it was about to strike, it hadn't been trying to scare me. It had been keeping me safe. From what? I didn't know. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The cold spots, they'd always come when I was feeling overwhelmed, giving me a moment to catch my breath. The whispers, they'd warned me in their own twisted way when something was wrong. Even the shadows, they'd kept me from seeing things I wasn't ready to see. It wasn't a demon. Not really. It was something else, something darker, something worse, and it had chosen me. I finally confronted it. I didn't plan to. I wasn't that brave. But one night, I sat alone in my apartment. The air grew heavy, and I knew it was there. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed to deepen, swirling like ink in water. And then it stepped forward, not as some monstrous figure with horns and claws, but as something far more unsettling, a reflection of me. It looked like me, but wrong. Its eyes were too dark, its smile too sharp, and its movements too fluid, like it wasn't quite bound by the same rules as the rest of the world. It tilted its head, studying me with an expression that was equal parts curiosity and amusement. "You figured it out," it said, its voice a distorted echo of my own. "Took you long enough." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. "What are you?" It laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "I'm you, or at least a part of you, the part you've been trying to ignore." I shook my head, trying to make sense of his words. "That's not possible." "Isn't it?" it said, stepping closer. "Think about it. Who's always been there when you needed protection? Who's kept you safe, even when you didn't realize it?" I stared at it, my mind racing. The cold spots, the whispers, the shadows. It hadn't been a demon. It had been me, or at least a part of me I didn't want to acknowledge. "But my friends," I said, my voice trembling. "What about them?" It smiled, a cruel, twisted smile. "They got what they deserved. They hurt you, didn't they? Made you feel small, insignificant. I just evened the score." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You didn't have to do that." "Didn't I?" it said, tilting its head again. "You've always been too soft, too forgiving. But not me. I protect what's mine." And with that, it was gone, leaving me alone in the darkness with nothing but my thoughts and the sinking realization that I'd been wrong about everything. He demon, or whatever it was, left me with a choice, a cruel, impossible choice. It didn't spell it out, not exactly, but the message was clear. I could let it finish what it started, or I could try to stop it. Letting it finish meant giving in to the part of me that had been hurt, the part that had been pushed around and laughed at, and made to feel small. It meant letting it take revenge on everyone who'd ever wronged me, not just Sarah, Jake, and Emma. It meant embracing the darkness, letting it consume me until there was nothing left but the sharp edges and the cold, unyielding rage. Stopping it? Well, that was the hard part. Stopping it meant facing it, meant facing myself. It meant acknowledging the part of me I'd spent my whole life trying to ignore, the part that was capable of things I didn't want to admit. It meant taking responsibility for what had happened, for what I'd allowed to happen. I didn't know what to do. I mean, how do you make a choice like that? How do you choose between giving in to the darkness and fighting it, knowing that either way, you'll never be the same? I thought about Sarah, broken and hollow. I thought about Jake, consumed by his own paranoia. I thought about Emma, locked away in her own mind. And I thought about me, standing on the sidelines, watching it all happen and doing nothing to stop it. And then I thought about the demon, the way it had protected me, the way it had kept me safe, even as it destroyed everyone around me. It was a part of me, yes, but it wasn't me. Not really. I made my choice. The demon is gone, banished. At least I think it is. I performed the ritual, the same one Sarah, Jake, and Emma used to summon it, but in reverse. I don't know if it worked, not really, but the weight in the air is gone. The whispers have stopped, and the shadows no longer move on their own, but the damage is done. Sarah is still in the hospital, her mind shattered beyond repair. Jake is missing and no one seems to know where he went. And Emma, well, Emma hasn't left her house in weeks. I've tried to reach out to her to explain what happened, but she won't answer the door. As for me, I'm not sure what to feel. Relief, guilt, fear, all of the above maybe. I made my choice, and I have to live with it, but that doesn't make it any easier. I keep thinking about the demon, about the part of me it represented, the part that wanted revenge, that wanted to hurt the people who'd hurt me. I thought banishing it would make me feel better, but it didn't. If anything, it made me feel worse, because now I have to face the fact that it was there all along, lurking in the corners of my mind, waiting for a chance to break free. And the worst part, I'm not sure it's really gone. Sometimes, late at night, I'll catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow where there shouldn't be one, a whisper in the silence. And I'll wonder, did I really banish it, or did I just push it down, deeper into the darkness, where it's waiting for the next time I let my guard down? I don't know, and maybe I never will.